Hi, Shalom everyone, a special edition tonight. We know that we're learning Masechet Bava Batra, page 92 over here, that Tzadik Bet respectively, and it talks about the story within regards to Megillat Ruth in today's stuff we were speaking about yesterday. For example, can you leave the land of Israel? Should you make Aliyah to Israel if you are living abroad? What are the reasons? We learned that, if God forbid there's a famine, could that be a reason enough to leave the land of Israel and go back to the diaspora? Because very much we know from the story within regards to Elimelech in Megillat Ruth that he actually went to Chutz Haaretz at one stage in time and it didn't necessarily turn out so favorably. So let's relive and recount the story within regards to Ruth, because Shavuot, I know it is about more than half a year away, but it's always good to do some chazara, to learn some stuff, to educate ourselves with regards to the stories from the Torah, Nevi'im and Ketuvim. So very much, it's a very good opportunity over here. We see how great Ruth, or as we call it in Hebrew, Ruth, she happened to be a Moabite princess, as we very much know. Now, Moab and Ammon come from Lot. We know that very much from Sefer Bereshit, very much so. And she would become the great-grandmother of David HaMelech, King David. And she wasn't Jewish originally. And we are going to explore now the story of what actually happened to her. How did it evolve that she became the great-grandmother of King David and became such a righteous woman? How she's got a Megillah actually named after her. We know that at the time when the judges ruled Israel, we know that Am Yisrael at that stage in time, at various different points of time, there were challenges within regards to observance of mitzvot and Torah. And unfortunately, as Hashem rewards Am Yisrael, he sometimes has to give tochacha or some sort of a rebuke to Am Yisrael. So unfortunately, there was a famine that actually occurred in the land of Israel at one stage in time. And we know that at that point in time, in the plains of Judah in of itself, he was great, Elimelech, he was very, very wealthy, great in wealth, very much so. And obviously, he was not going to be used to poorness or poverty or famine or hunger. So he thought he would be able to move elsewhere at that stage in time. So he took his wife Naomi and their two sons, and they went to live in Moab. They went outside of Israel. We're talking all about can you leave Israel or not. So they actually went outside over there. And it's actually interesting, Ruth at that stage in time became very friendly with let's just say, with the Jewish community over there. She saw the different halachot within regards to the different laws and the different minhagim, the customs of Am Yisrael. And she took a huge favouring within regards to it. And she also saw that the rotten lifestyle within regards to idol worship, Avodah Zarah, that maybe her people, natural people, had actually had a positive outlook towards, and she was repulsed by it over there. And so when one of the sons asked her to marry him, she was happy and proud to accept at that stage in time. She didn't feel any regret whatsoever when she was going to marry one of the sons of Elimelech at this stage in time. She actually would get married to one of the sons of Elimelech, and she was willing to give up, let's say, a life of luxury at her palace, because she actually came from royalty herself. Ruth did. Actually, she came from great wealth, great prosperity, great royalty, all the greatness you could imagine, majestic. And she saw what happened in her community, the selfishness that was on, the mercilessness, all the different issues there were within regards to it, all the terrible Avodah Zarah. And at that point in time, she saw that through the sphere and through the lens, that being parts of now, let's say, the Jewish community, how good it was. However, it would turn to sorrow very quickly, because Elimelech, father-in-law, and his two sons, one of them was the husband of Ruth, they died. And Naomi was left as a poor widow, not knowing what to do or which way to turn. She said to Ruth and to her other daughter-in-law, who was married to the other son, Orpah, she said, please, you don't need to be here at the moment. You can go back to your place. I am going to return to my hometown, to Bethlehem, at the time, Bethlehem, as we call it in English. It's not going to be comfortable over there. We know there's been famine, there's been different problems over there. Oh, why should you suffer? You can go back to your parents' house. You've got a majestic lifestyle. You've got palace and everything else. Everything, all the luxuries got there. And obviously they've got no commitment to stay with Naomi at this stage in time, their mother-in-law, because the husbands have passed away over here. So she is trying to encourage them, let's say, to actually go back to the vicinity of Moab. Orpah, she unequivocally gratitude. She said thanks to her mother-in-law, and she went and said goodbye, and she returned to her palace. But what happened with Ruth, the great Ruth, who would become the great Ruth? She was in tears, bursted in tears, and said, I'm going to stay with you unequivocally, Ruth, my mother-in-law. And with great words, she implored her, saying, please, let's stay together. She wanted to lodge with her. She wanted to be with her. She recognized God. She recognized monotheism. She was so, let's just say, elated with in regards to the Jewish community over here. And Ruth will actually stay with Naomi over here. And she knew that there's going to be troubleship. She knew that there was going to be difficulties. And Naomi obviously told her about all the difficulties that could come over here because there was poverty. They lost all their wealth. There was going to be hard times, but they stuck together, and Ruth actually cling with Naomi, who was a great woman. And we actually would see that there was a bountiful benefit, we'll see, which comes from it. Ruth stayed with her even in poverty, and she didn't even regret it. She could have thought at one stage in time there could have been Chasam Charata saying, look at what I've forsaken, all this luxury, and now I'm in dire, let's just say, difficulties over here. And we know it's famously reported, especially inside Tanakh, in the Megillat Ruth, that at the time when there was a harvest time period, Ruth and Naomi came finally back to Judah, to the plains of Judah over there. Obviously, they were devastated, they were tired, exhausted, they were suffering from poverty, they were hungry. And Ruth told Naomi, rest. And she would go to the fields out in Bethlehem and see what could sustain them over there. They knew that there was different halachot where there would be permissible to take actually produce over there. She came into the field and she saw that there was many men, obviously, were cutting barley over there, were binding barley, and were piling them into different pieces and carting them away. And she, what's interesting, she was obviously very, very hungry, and she knew she had to get something, not just for herself. She was selfless. She wanted to get for her mother-in-law, Naomi. And she went in a very snua fashion and was picking up the things that was permissible, because when there's different laws in regards to payah, leket, and various different laws in regards to what, say, someone of the poor category can actually take. And she saw that a stranger would actually come to her and speak to her with a soft tone, with a kind and gentle tone, and say, God be with you, stranger. Come along in this field, do not be bashful. Gather some ears of corn and satisfy your hunger. Who was this? It happened to be Boaz over here, who happened to be the owner of the field. And he actually said in the most eloquent way to Ruth at the time, knowing that she was probably very hungry and her situation. Ruth unequivocally thanked him and plucked some of the ears of the grains. And as she was going to depart, she heard a voice actually over here urge her and say, gather the payah of it. Payah, we've learned the laws with regards to this inside the Daf Yomi over here on various different occasions. So Ruth actually asked, what is payah? Because she obviously is enthusiasm and she's elated with regards to Judaism, but she doesn't necessarily know all the halachot. So Boaz, I think, told her that our Torah tells us that when the owner of a field has his grain to cut, he is not to cut the corners of the field, but to leave them for the poor, the needy, the stranger to come and reap for themselves. Boaz obviously answered in a very gentle fashion. We know the beauty about the Torah over here, that if someone is hungry, someone is in need, the Torah always will have in a dignified manner to help them in a upright way to get their food. So Ruth was absolutely thought how wonderful this is, and she stayed. She cut the corn from a corner of the field and was then again about to go away. And then what happened? Don't go yet, Boaz said. Take some leket now. Leket is another produce part over there. What does leket mean? She's trying to learn the Torah. She's trying to learn Judaism more and more. She's growing at this point in time. So Boaz will tell her, according to the law of Judaism, if a reaper misses some grain with his scythe, let's say, or drops some, he is not allowed to go back to gather that grain. And this must be left for the poor and the stranger. So Boaz says this in a gentle way to Ruth, respectively. And there was more, let's say, an attraction over here that's coming on. And she saw what a noble lady she actually was. Ruth didn't say anything, but saw no reason for refusing to take advantage of the laws of the Torah. She sees it's permissible. The Torah advocates it over here. So she embraced to take those things. As she gathered a massive basketful, let's just say, of it, she thanked Boaz. You see the kindness and the midot tovot over there, the excellent character traits. And as she was ready to go again, now Boaz also teaches another halacha, which gives her a permissibility to take more things. He says over here, there's shikha over here, forgotten sheaves, which you can take. It's actually interesting. We said, I believe only a couple of weeks ago, the Parshat HaShavua, we talked all about the various different mitzvot, and also shikha, and over here we are doing a Daf Yomi tidbit, also talking about. So what is shikha? She would now explain to him. So he answers, when the owner of a field is taking his load of grain to his granaries, it is possible that he may have forgotten, let's say, some of these sheaves in the field. And we know that the Torah forbids him to go back and get them. He must leave these forgotten sheaves for the poor, for the widow, for the orphan, and the stranger. So Ruth, once again, was very happy. She gathered it. She was very polite and thanked Boaz. Obviously, to the midot tovot of hakarat tov, debt of gratitude. And at this stage in time, Boaz was mesmerized by her. What an excellent person, what excellent midot. So he would actually inquire about her. Who is this woman? And discovered she was a widowed daughter-in-law of Naomi. So Ruth was obviously very happy. She related over to her mother-in-law what actually occurred over here inside these fields. All the kindness that this man had. So Naomi obviously was very happy that Ruth had been very successful and had a connection, let's just say, to Boaz at this stage in time, the wealthy landowner. And Boaz asked her to, and when Boaz asked her to marry him, Naomi urged her and encouraged her to actually go ahead with this. We see the selflessness of Naomi. Her son had just been married to her, and now automatically she wants Ruth to be happy, and she encourages a marriage union between her and Boaz. So Ruth was, let's say, at this stage in time, was now all of a sudden going to marry someone very wealthy and very happy, and she was obviously very excited. So she and Boaz were blessed with children who became obviously very famous in history. She lived long enough to see her great-grandson, who would become King David, David HaMelech as we say, who became, let's say, Hashem's anointed, and the king, the Melech of all the Jewish people. It's actually interesting. So how did this come about? We know that Ruth and Boaz would have a son called Obed, who became the father of Jesse, or Yishai, as we call it. And David was the younger son of Yishai over here, and that's what happened over here. Well, it's relating over different parts of this story in the Daf in today's page, because we're trying to learn about the case, should you leave Israel or not? We see that Elimelech took his two sons outside. It didn't necessarily work out over here. God forbid, we don't want that to happen to anybody else. But we're illustrating different stories from different parameters, from different case scenarios, and it's always very interesting. Friends, this is page 92 of Masechet Bava Batra. We are a community over here. We're learning together Daf Yomi. Wishing you all a fantastic day. I'd like to dedicate this Lilu Nishmat to all the heroic soldiers out there that unfortunately lost their lives since the 7th of October. Wishing you all a great day. Take care.